Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and I'd like to welcome you to Generationally Speaking. Here at the table, we come and we discuss life issues, no matter what they might be. As we sit at the table with each generation, we all learn, we all grow, we all are inspired.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Generationally Speaking. Hello, I am Reverend Irene Smith, and welcome to Generationally Speaking. I am so happy that you joined us today. I know you're asking, where is this lady now? Let me tell you, I am in Jackson, Tennessee, having a wonderful time. If you're looking for my co-hosts, Pastor Shamika Latte Oliver and Minister James Durham, they're not with me this time, but trust me, they're not too far away, and they'll catch up with us on some other adventures. Well, I traveled all the way to Jackson, Tennessee to come to the table of discernment with a young lady that I met through someone else who introduced us. And you know, at the table of discernment, it's where we come with our life issues. It's where we come to share the journeys of others and to hear and to learn. And so when I met my special guest today, April, I said to myself, man, let me tell you, I got to interview her. So you know what? Jump the plane, and here we are out here in Jackson, Tennessee. And I want you to meet my special guest today, April Webster. April, how are you?
I am doing wonderful, and I'm so excited to have you in Jackson, Tennessee, so we can have a dialogue on today.
Yes, yes. And you're probably wondering, well, Reverend Smith, what made you select April? Well, the more I heard about her journey, the more I knew that there were other young people that needed to hear so that they could grow and discern from her and say, you know what? If God blessed her like that, guess what? He's got a blessing for me as well. So, April, I want you to first introduce yourself to our listening audience. And I always start that off by saying, tell us about those formative years that you grew up in Kentucky. What kind of family? Big family, large family, farmland, suburbs? What was it like?
I am from a small town called Hickman, Kentucky. Listen, if you blink, you're going to miss us. But just know there's great things that come out of Hickman. I came from a family of, it was my brothers. I have two brothers, and my mom and my father. My parents would have been married 44 years in December. My father transitioned in May, but we came from a very close-knit family. My father's side is really large, and he was so big on family. So I know family on every side. On my mother's side, my grandmother's side, my grandfather, my dad wanted to make sure that we knew our family. So I come from a very loving and caring family.
So when you look back over your years as a young girl, as a teenager, as a young adult, can you recall some pivotal moments in your life that perhaps propelled you to where God is taking you?
Yes, ma'am. Very good question, too. I can recall I was roughly 14 years old, and I was sitting on the porch in small areas. We had a front porch, and we had a nice side front yard. And my brother and I, we was on the porch just cutting up, and all of a sudden, I see a vehicle literally in the air.
Wow.
And as it's coming, we're like, oh my gosh, like we're in a movie. And it lands right there in our yard. And it's a very bad car wreck.
Wow.
I get into action. Now I'm 14. I jump up, I tell my mom, call 911. And I run down the hill to the car wreck, right? I run down the hill, and I'm walking to the side of the car. So I'm like, oh no, stay still. Because I was talking to one of the guys, and the other were not responding. And I said, stay still. And I go run back up, and I grab towels. And I just started, my mom was like, what's going on? I'm like, it's bad, And it's like I just went into action. And I knew at that point in my life, God was calling me for more. Yeah. And then I would hear prophecies later on that, God's going to use her and different things like that. I'm like, okay. But that day, and I can still picture it today, that day I knew that one probably wouldn't make it and the other would. As I began to wrap the towels around his head, and it was literally split. Now, I'm a 14-year-old having all this blood on my hands, and I'm steady running back and forth. But I knew at that moment I was destined for greatness. I was destined for more, and I knew that I would have to leave my hometown in order to achieve whatever it was that God had for me. It started when I was 14.
Wow. So when you look back, did you, over your early years, did you grow up in the church?
Yes, ma'am. Did I grow up in the church? Now, the new generation, they don't have to do the Sunday school, the Bible study, the Friday night service, the youth conventions. I did all of it. I was a Sunday school secretary. I was a teacher. I sung in the choir. I ushered on the children. Even when they had the youth board ushers, I was an usher. So there was not a Sunday that I can recall that I didn't attend church. Yeah. I grew up from church. And the thing about it, not only did, some people, unfortunately, send their children to church, our parents took us to church. We went to church as a family. We were there. My mother made sure that my brothers and I understood the word at a young age. Definitely. So we were able to apply it throughout our life.
Right. So, growing up in church, you hear so many things. Mm-hmm. But are there any affirmations like, the mothers of the church, the elders of the church, they always, sweetie and all of those names they have for you. And then and sometimes in our community we are cocooned. Do you remember any of the affirmations that they said to you that warm your heart to empower you and to propel you to move forward?
I can always remember one thing that I heard constantly throughout my life was trust in the Lord. Sure. And that scripture, when you begin to think about that scripture in Proverbs, when it says, trust in the Lord, lean not into your own understanding, in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. That stood with me from a young girl growing up. If you just trust in the Lord. Yeah. When you trust in the Lord and don't trust in man, don't trust in your own will, but when you trust in God, listen, everything will work out according to the plan. So, yes, ma'am, I could just remember those type of things. And then, of course, growing up in the church, you would have those old those songs, the gospel hymns that we don't hear anymore. But, those songs like Have a Little Talk with Jesus. Yes. Tell them all about your problems, and then Amazing Grace. That was one of the songs that I absolutely disliked growing up, It's like they could carry on for days with that song. But, when you begin to understand God's grace, you understand that it is amazing. Yes. You understand that his grace is sufficient and it is truly amazing for all of us. So yes, ma'am, those things have gotten me through to this age that I am now, when I can lean back and look over those years and those things that was instilled into me as a child. And the scripture says, train up a child in the way that they should go. And that is true. You may go throughout some different things, but that wording and that teaching and that foundation, it will be with you.
Wow. So thinking about all those affirmations that you got, when young April went off to college,
woo-hoo-hoo.
Trust in the Lord. Lean not to your own understanding.
Yes.
How did that help you to enjoy college, but yet stay on track?
Yes, ma'am. Stay on track is what I try to do some days. Some days are better than others, but really and truly, when I went away to college, I went 5 hours away from my hometown. I went to HBCU, and I knew that I had to stay focused. Right. So even when I would go out and party, and I'm going to tell you, I would go out and party, I would have fun, I was in a sorority, I would be in the front of the line dancing and strolling and all those good things. But Sunday morning would come around, and despite whatever took place on Saturday night, I would find myself still in the house of the Lord. And I think it was those things that always kept me balanced, because I would have fun, and I enjoyed college. College was some of my best years. I met some friends that are lifetime friends, but they knew April is going to go to church, and I even sung in the gospel choir in college.
Right.
Yes, and we would travel to different cities, and that would keep me rooted and grounded too.
I hear my audience out loud saying, what HBCU did she go to?
Yes, I'm so glad they are thinking it. None other than Kentucky State University in Frankfort, Kentucky. I went away 5 hours from my hometown, and I was determined to definitely finish that degree. Right. I was gonna receive that degree, and then I ended up staying there, and I received my second degree, my master's degree from Kentucky State as well.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, historically, how long has Kentucky State been? When was it established?
That is a very good question. Now, I cannot recall the exact time frame for Kentucky State. I cannot recall the exact time, but it was in the 1800s. Yes,
so
ma'am.
It's been around.
It's been around for years.
All right.
Yes.
All right. So as you have matriculated through elementary and high school and college now, and you decide you move out into the work world. So where does God take you? And when does God begin to open up the first vision for you about where he wants you to be?
Oh, that is so good. So right after college, I started working for a company very similar to the one that I own now. And it is a company that works with adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I never knew I could do that type of work. So when I went, I used to have long nails and long hair and things like that. They did a bet on me. The young ladies that I work with, they did a bet I would not make it 30 days. So when I found out they had that bet going on, I said, oh, I'm going to prove them wrong. And not only did I end up continue to grow, I ended up, being their supervisor, and I stayed with that company for almost 6 years. And while I was there, I really began to grow and develop into a leader at a young age. At 22, I was a supervisor of over 75 people. That was my mother age. And I began to learn different things. And from that point, I remember having a conversation with the CEO. I went into her office. I had just received my master's degree, and I knew that there was no more room for growth at the company. The executive director is still there today, prime example. So there was no more room for me. I had grown from one level of leadership to the next level, and I was at that top tier. And so I sat there and I had a conversation with her, and the light bulb went off in my head. I can do this. I literally looked and I thought, I'm gonna sit in that seat one day. I'm gonna own a business just like this. I had learned the tools. The tools was right there. So I received my master's, and I began to say, Lord, what's next? So what I did, I was fasting and praying, growing up in church. I knew how to do all those things. And as God began to shift me, I stepped out on faith. I resigned from that company. I relocated to Memphis, Tennessee, which was actually 6 hours from Frankfort, without a job. But I trust in the Lord.
Come on now.
And I believe that he would open the door. I felt like at that point I had enough experience on the job. My education at that point I felt like would speak for itself. And so when I went to Memphis, I started trying to find jobs in that same field, and nothing was happening. I was confused. I'm like, okay, Lord, now I'm trusting in you, and I'm down here in Memphis, and now the doors don't seem to open. And it was companies that had, even the position that I had resigned from was available. And I did not get any of the jobs. So I just said, okay, it must be time to pivot.
Right.
And so at that point, I switched gears for just a few seasons. I switched gears and I started working somewhere else, and I started making even more money, and I was like, okay, this is good, but I still was not feeling satisfied. I still knew that there was more. I knew that there was more, and I wanted to get back to that field that I was in. So at that point, I started writing the vision and making it plain. I started reading, I started researching, I started trying to figure out ways to open a company similar to the one that I used to work for. And literally 6 years later, from the time that I resigned, I was able to open a company called Loving Arms Home Care Agency. And it is still 10 years as of August, we have been in business.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk more about the business as we move along. We're going to come back
Oh, yes,
and
ma'am.
incorporate it all. But I know my audience is sitting here and they're thinking to themselves, man, that's a beautiful shade of lipstick she has on. I'm like, I know you're wondering. I can hear you like, look, Reverend Smith, come on with it.
Come on with it.
And so let me ask you about that shade of lipstick that you have on.
I am so glad that you asked about this lipstick. This lipstick is from the A. Lachelle collection. And A. Lachelle is actually my brand that I was able to launch this year in 2022. Now, the vision of A. Lachelle came into place by my husband, Mr. LaShawn Webster. We were having conversation. This was back in before the pandemic. So we were having conversation, and I would only wear just red lipstick. I'm not really into makeup that much, but I feel like a woman should definitely have, when you speak, you know, definitely have something on your lips,
Right.
you know, even if it's a little gloss. And so my husband began to tell me that he loved the lipstick, and he said, you should have your own lipstick.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, okay. So he planted that seed.
Right.
And as he planted that seed, I began to definitely to do the watering. I will put on the vision board. It's on my vision board for 2020 and the vision board for 2021. And I began to do the research on it to try to figure out ways. And then my husband also came up with the name, A. Lachelle, which is the initial for April, which is my
Okay.
first name, and Lachelle is my middle name.
Okay.
So my husband came up with the idea of the lipstick and the name.
All right. So your husband, he's the genesis of
He is.
A. Lachelle. But then there's so many shades of red.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the world knows that, but there are so many shades of red. And red can turn so many different colors. So how did you work at getting this particular shade? And what shade would you call it if you had to put a name to the shade?
Okay, there is a name to
Okay.
this shade, and this is the Pop Red.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. No, today I have on the Red Hot. This is the Red Hot lipstick.
Okay.
And it is a matte. Now I do have some crimson red. I do have some. I do have the Pop Red, which is a cream. So I do have different shades. But as I was sampling and going through the different, working with the manufacturing company, I knew, for me, it had to be something that was going to be hot. You know, I'm like, I need a red hot. I need a lipstick that's going to pop awesome when people see it. And that's when I was going through those. And my husband, he was the person, I would try them on. And I was like, what you think about this? And we'll look in the mirror, we go back and forth. And then it's like, oh, that's it. That's the one. And so we did that with several tubes. I mean, we went through a lot of lipstick to try and to see which ones that I really wanted to put my hand on. And so selected several. And they're on my website. They're available. And everything. Yes, ma'am.
So you, as young entrepreneurs who are watching, what would you say to them about some of the pitfalls that you had to go through, endure, face, in order to find yourself on the other side?
Yes, ma'am. Understand success does not happen overnight. Understand you have to invest in yourself, in your brand, in whatever it is that you want to do. And investment also requires money.
Yeah.
You have to be able to sacrifice, make some sacrifices in life. There were times that I used to like to go shopping and get my hair done and all these different things. But in order to accomplish my goal, I had to put those things to the side. I like to fine dine. My husband tell you, nice restaurants. But there was times that was out. You know, it was no spending. It was literally investing in myself required saving. It required me having to make those sacrifices. So if you're wanting to start a business, understand you have to give 110 every single day.
Yeah.
There is no off days. People think as entrepreneurs, oh, it's just this glamorous life. Yes, that may come in time, but on the beginning side, you have to invest. You have to put your hands to the plow. You have to do the groundwork. And I can even think about, even with my business, working with the adults with disability in the home care setting, I literally started at the bottom. I started in the homes taking care of the members. And there's nothing today that I would not do in my company. So people have to understand that you have to still be willing to give in spite of how high God may take you. You still have to be willing to do those things. And so investing in yourself is very important. Saving and understand that it costs.
Yeah.
It costs. Even now, when I started with the lipstick, I had to I had to invest. I had to invest in order to get the tubes that I like, to get the manufacturing company, to do different shades. All of that requires funding.
Right.
So you have to understand that. And I am very big on, I did not want to take out loans. That was something that personally, for me, I just did not want to do. Now, I'm not against people that, sometimes I've had conversations and I'll tell them if you have to take out a small business, if you have credit that you want to build, then there are ways that you can do that as well. You have to find out your niche and what it's going to require for you to get your business up and going. And understand that even with the high and the lows, as an entrepreneur, even with the staff that I have, that we are the last to get paid. There are times that you don't get paid. You have to make sure that payroll, when you have staff, you have to make sure the payroll's met. And that means if you're the last one, sometimes it goes that way. And people have to understand that it requires sacrifice.
I'm so glad you mentioned the sacrifices and the payroll, because I think so often as young entrepreneurs, they think of immediate gratification.
Yes.
And they don't really think about the sleepless nights, the tears, the times when it's strained. So how did you dig deep, you and your husband? How did you in particular, how did you dig deep to say, you know what, it's not always going to be this way?
I think that's definitely where the upbringing and the background, those things came into play, because there have been times that there were some sleepless nights, a lot of times. There were some crying days. There was moments that I was like, okay, Lord, did I miss you? Did I hear correctly? I feel like I can hear and I'm in tune, but sometimes maybe I was off. There have been I've had those moments. But I go back to, but I know greater is He that's in me. Yeah. And I trust the plan of the Lord, and I continue to work the principles. And one thing my husband says, stand on your square. And that means definitely working those principles that I know. So there's 3 things that I like to tell people. In the midst of entrepreneurship, in the high and the lows, you have to, 1, stay faithful, stay fearless. Faith without works is dead. You have to be able to work it even when you're tired. You can't let fear come in. Even when the numbers are not adding up, you have to be fearless. You got to stay fearless, have your faith intact, and then stay focused. Yeah. If you use those 3 things, you stay focused on whatever it is, then you will definitely see the other side. Right. But you have to make sure to work those principles every day. It's not a day that I don't get up and I work those principles.
So when you talked about staying focused, when you decided, you're successful with this one business, and then suddenly, or not suddenly, but then God drops something else into your lap and say, pursue this. But then there are people on the outside saying, well, why can't you just be satisfied?
Oh, yes.
With this? Why are you going after that when you have this? So what do you say to my audience about all those naysayers that sometimes come on when they see you successful in one area and they think, well, you should be satisfied?
Yes, ma'am. And understand this, everybody's not going to be for you. And everybody's not going to support you. And that is not your audience. You got to understand, that's just not your tribe. Sometimes people will come along and they will be with you for a lifetime. Then there will be people that will be with you for a season.
Right.
You have to understand that it comes with the territory. And so for me, one thing that I've learned is that in this process and in this journey, to accept and celebrate the ones that celebrate your wins and the ones that do not, you have to understand that sometimes you have to let people go. Let them go, and you continue to move forward. So back to what you're saying in regards to when you already got a successful business and then you start something else and it's like, okay, what's going on? You know, she's already should be satisfied. I feel like you never should get to a place where you're just totally satisfied. There's still more. If you still have breath in your body, there is still more on the inside of you to do. Have I been successful when it comes to loving arms? Yes. But do I feel like God is shifting me now? Yes. And now in this shift, I'm going to give 110%, just like I did when I birthed Loving Arms. And so I think that key for me is we walk by faith and not by sight. So when you're walking by faith, you cannot always look to the left nor to the right. You have to understand that the naysayers are going to talk. They're going to come as distractions. They're going to come to discourage you along the way, to say you already there, you always trying to, blah, blah, blah. You will hear those things, but you got to keep walking by faith, because it is still an audience. It is still a village. It's still a group of people. It's still a tribe that obviously need whatever God is birthing in you now. In this season, it's people that need that from you.
So I hear you talking about the tribe and about staying laser focused. And so, perhaps this is what kept you when the water gets murky.
Ooh, yes.
You know, the water can get murky sometimes, and it's like, but I gotta go. So that laser focus and trusting in the Lord is what kept you.
Yes, ma'am, because that water will get very, very murky, and it'll get high. It'll continue to get higher and higher. You have to understand who you are, and you have to understand who you're called to be. And when you understand who you are and who you're called to be, and you understand your why, it'll keep you moving forward. Because if not, you'll get stagnated. You'll get stuck in that mud.
So you have loving hands?
Loving arms.
Loving arms.
Yes,
So you have
ma'am.
loving arms. And then you have Ayla Shell.
Yes.
But then I see this.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
tell me about this.
This is my 40-day devotional called Daddy's Girl. And as I mentioned in the beginning, my father transitioned this year, May 24th, from pancreatic cancer. And it was a 40-day journey.
Wow.
We found out, and 40 days later, he transitioned. And it took our life by storm. It shook us up and down, But I realized in that dark season, God was birthing something new. And I tell a story in Daddy's Girl. In Daddy's Girl, it is a very, very powerful, enlightened, inspiring, encouraging book that I want to encourage you to definitely purchase. But because it really does give anecdotes, and I get personal. I tell stories, and I tell about our experience and our journey in this book. And I also give affirmations that have allowed me to begin to heal in the grieving process. We're just now about to be 6 months in from me losing my father unexpectedly. And God has birthed Daddy's Girl and Ayla Shell, which all falls under the umbrella of Dr. April Webster's ministry.
All right. Yeah.
Woo. Which, when you start to think about that, it's like, okay, God, what are we doing here? So, yes, Daddy's Girl, it is definitely a great devotion that I encourage people to do.
So is it